Hello and welcome back to my DayZ 0.63 damage system series. In this episode we're going to be looking at the second most important stat in DayZ, blood. The biggest change to blood is that hardly any damaging attacks in DayZ cause blood damage anymore. Those that do cause blood damage inflict a very small amount, so the only real risk of dying due to blood loss is through bleeding. Another big change is that infected are no longer as annoying as they will never make you bleed, making the only risk of bleeding coming from other players, unless you accidentally blow your toes off. This means bleeding will mostly come in the form of gunshots, but sharp melee weapons such as axes, knives and pointy inanimate objects can also cause bleeding frequently. Note that blunt weapons like the sledgehammer won't cause bleeding. However, in a melee fight, the main cause of death will likely be due to health loss anyway, so what I just said was pretty useless, which I'll cover in another video. When you take damage that can cause the bleeding status effect, your blood indicator will display 3 downwards arrows when you're bleeding. For every body part you receive the bleeding status effect, you will need to bandage. So far I've found 8 body parts that potentially bleed: the left and right foot, left and right leg, left and right arm, the torso and finally the head. If you were bleeding from all of these locations at the same time, you would need 8 bandages or rags to stop the bleeding. However, if you shoot yourself in the foot 425,298 times, you will only need 1 bandage. For every body part you receive bleeding, the amount of blood loss per second will be multiplied. As an example, the AKM causes you to bleed at 3.5 blood per second when shot in the limbs, so if you were shot in the foot, you're losing 3.5 blood per second from an AKM. If shot in both feet, you're losing 7 blood per second. However, higher caliber weapons won't cause much more bleeding. The Makarov causes 3 blood per second when shot in the foot, and the Mosin causes 3.5 blood per second when shot in the foot. These numbers are roughly doubled when it comes to being shot in the torso. During these tests, I also discovered that clothing doesn't reduce how much you bleed per second, nor does it have any additional effects on the additional items you have in your clothing, so having more items won't cause you to bleed less. On top of this, additional items in clothing no longer reduce your chance to bleed, along with clothing not reducing this chance, so you no longer need to carry around hordes of items in your clothing for protection like in 0.62. Now I haven't fully tested the clothing and its effects on health loss, but I believe protection against attacks may be non-existent in this patch. That's based on my tests so far, pending further tests. As a final note for fighting against bleeding, every time you use a bandage it will stop bleeding on 1 body part. So if you're bleeding from 3 body parts but only have 2 rags, patch yourself up anyway to reduce the bleeding effects while hunting down the 3rd rag that you need. Blood is still based on representing how many milliliters of blood is in a human's body, 5,000 milliliters. So between 5,000 and 4,000 milliliters, you'll see the white blood indicator. Yellow is 4,000 to 3,000 and red is below 3,000. You die from blood loss now at 2,750 milliliters of blood, no longer 0. Blood is the only stat that doesn't have a blinking red indicator. You're probably wondering why this is. Well, I have no idea. Now because this stat is a little weird and I just wanted to confirm these numbers, I went ahead and used blood bags on myself. Each blood bag now removes 250 milliliters of blood from you, so 9 times 250 milliliters, this checks out. For those of you that say you should die at 0 milliliters of blood like in 0.62 in previous patches, you would realistically die long before this due to impaired perfusion in the medullary vasomotor center. So yeah, get told, scrubs. But if you want some evidence that shock will be in the new damage system, unconsciousness happens before death due to a lack of nutrients to the brain through the blood, or some such. Anyway, like I said in my previous video, it's early days for the new damage system. This info may and probably will change, but what we discovered here I'm sure will help many survivors in getting used to this new damage system. Thanks for watching, and look after those medullary vasomotor centers, guys.